Alright, so we're back into the steering column finally. Boy. Got another wire that goes down in here. It has to be disconnected. It goes into the steering column up front. Then the next thing you gotta do, you gotta drop this lower piece. If you don't have as much electronic BS as I do, it's a little easier. A couple of 10mm bolts down here once you get the rest of the stuff done and it gets out of the way. And the next thing you got to do, you got to take this piece off. It's just a knee brace of some sort, and it's just held on up here on each side, front and then back here, by some 13mm nuts. You got to get yourself a long socket and you can pop them right off. And I think we're getting there. This looks like to be the actual thing that holds the steering column on each side, and there's a couple more back here kind of hidden up in there. You have to go underneath to get them. There's some real hair triggery kind of stuff in here, like this little wire. I don't really know what that is, but I'm gonna try to be careful with it, because that's something. I think what it looks like, if we can see it, is there's a joint right here just behind this last brace, and I believe that's a pinch bolt, and if I loosen that, that should pop out, and I shouldn't have to pull the steering wheel through the steering column through the firewall. I'm thinking. At least I'm hoping that's how it's going to work. The next big thing is there's another trillion wires related to this thing that go into this giant switch, giant plug, and I'm not 100% sure how all that comes apart, but obviously that's going to have to, because that's all part of this harness. We got this thing here, which I don't know what it does. Another wire here, a bunch more wires here. Oh, that's what that is. I'll be darned. This thing here, that is actually what, if you follow this little cable, it goes up into there. That's actually what runs your gear indicator. Isn't that neat? I didn't know that. So if your gear indicator breaks, it's that little tiny wire. So that's interesting. But what I'm going to try to do now, before I drop those 4 bolts, I'm going to loosen that pinch bolt, because if I do that now, I won't have to do it after everything's sloppy. And then I'm going to try to figure out how to get all the rest of these plugs undone, because yeah, that's the next step. So we'll be back. So once you get this cover off of the big harness, that plug seems to be held in place with a 7mm bolt. I'm gonna see how that comes out. Nothing ever comes out easy. Come on. I wonder if it's captured. And there she goes. It seems to be a captured bolt. But that's fairly long threaded, of course. There it is. Yep. Okay, so that's important. There are a couple of screws, Torx head screws, on this, but you don't want to take those off, because, well, those are apparently pretty important. And, well, look at that. You can see in there, there's your adjustment for the shifter indicator. So that's kind of neat. Looks like that has to come off, which is an even smaller than 7. at maybe a 6, and then you can unhook it from the other side and get it out of the way so the steering column can come down. So that's next. So this is one of those times. When you realize it's a Ford, because that's not a 6 or a 5. It's a 7/32. So off she comes. Okay, all the rest of the wires are unhooked. I have to say the one that went up here is a little screwy because you can't see it, but it needs to be popped open from the back and pulled off. This one here is this big thing. It just needs to kind of be pushed a little bit and it'll pop off from the back. I can't stand the way they did this. I understand why they did it, having all of these things mounted on here, because the entire thing came in as an assembly. And these, I wish they'd just done it backwards, because it would make it a lot easier to remove. But I guess after 21 years and 260,000 miles, they really didn't give a damn. So I did do the pinch bolt. The U-joint is loose right now, so hopefully when I pop the next 4 bolts off, this baby will come out. Oh, and one thing I thought that was kind of interesting, let's see if I can do this. If you pull on the spring, you can see it move, and actually underneath it, you may be able to actually see the spring. So if that ever fails, you got a little tiny spring in there that returns it back to the right, and that's what goes on with your shifter indicator, your shift mechanism. So I'm going to pull the next 4 bolts off and we'll see what kind of a mess I can make. So she's down, but got one more little piece of sadness back there. The actual shifter cable to the transmission. And I can feel behind it, and there's no nut on the back of it. So I don't want to break it. I think it just pops off, but I'm not 100% sure. So I may go do a little bit of research. Alright, this I'm not too terribly happy about, because I can't really find anybody who's made a video of what this does. To me, it just looks like it pops on, and I guess they are fairly easy to find in a parts store, so if I break it, I'll have to buy a new one. But the problem is getting in there with something to get at it. Oh, well, that'll help. That'll help. Let's see. This would be something to do. Yeah, that's it. She just pops off. It's a little ball and socket, and that's it. I love the factory tie wrap holding the bracket in place. Actually looks like that is all part of the steering column, so I'm gonna have to cut that and unhook it, and then that'll have to go back in. So, oh, look at that, another freaking spring. Jeez, man, what are they doing here? Hopefully that pulls out. We'll try to show you that in a second. Alright, so that thing came off a lot harder than it looked, even though it was really just only pressed into that slot back there. And now I'm having a little trouble with this because the shaft is moving outside, but it's not coming out here. So I think what I've got is there's like the ones in the front, they're safety, and there is actually a groove in the shaft where the bolt goes through. So if you don't pull that pinch bolt all the way out, it won't let you slip it out, because it is, as you can see, it is loose. It's just being held there. So I'm going to pull that pinch bolt out the rest of the way, and then we should be out of here. And that's exactly what it is. As you can see, this is now out. I hope. Good gracious. And that's the steering column. All this for that bearing. Let's see what else we can see. Alright, I see that a bushing on the shifter, both of them are kind of junky, which is why it's been pretty sloppy. It never failed, but it's all trash. So there's that spring. Here's that pin I was telling you about, the groove. Yeah, you can see where they set it up with all of their harnesses like this, because the clock spring wires go over here, a couple of other things, and then this one here, that's that last big one that came off for whatever in the hell it does. Now, what I don't understand is how to remove the key cylinder, because if you don't remove the key cylinder, it looks like it may just be that ball detent. If you don't remove this, then this plastic piece can't come off, and you know, that just makes life difficult. So I'm gonna try to attempt that, and hopefully if I can't do that, or if I break it, I'll be able to get the truck that I pulled the clock spring off of a couple of months ago. Hopefully it's still there, because I've already done half the work I need to do, and it had a set of keys that I found in the dash, so I left them in the ignition. So we're gonna check it. So that is all it took. Push down on the little ball detent, slowly pull it out. Here's your assembly. Wow, that was easier than I expected. I took the multi-function switch off as well, just to see how that came off, and that's just a couple of little Torx screws and some big plugs. So, because I don't want to pay for that if I don't need it, and that one works. That's about everything. Let's see. I don't think I want to pull that shifter rod. Let's flip this back over. And then this piece then comes off easily. Everything else is good. Oh, okay. I see this little wire here. This is actually the overdrive button. The overdrive off button. The wire goes up, comes around, and goes up into the handle. And it's this button here for the overdrive. Okay. That's pretty cool. All right. Well, let's see if there's anything interesting around the back. A little bit of crud. And I don't know what this reluctor looking wheel is. This solenoid, that is, I believe, the brake lockout. So when you put your foot on the brake, that pulls down, or fall, you know, this lets it come down, and that allows you to take it out of park. That's what that is. So just a note, if that ever fails on your truck, you might be able to reach up there and pull it, because it's just, you know, that you just follow the wire around. You just got to pull that down. But if that thing ever stops working, it's all this work to do that, to get to it, because you are not, I don't think, getting to that without pulling the column. So there's your detents for reverse, drive, 1, 2, 3, park, neutral. Interesting. Pretty cool. Okay, well, that's apart, and now I'm going to gather all my tools up and probably head to the pick apart, see what I can find, because I need one of these, and that's what we're going to do. Well, here they are. New one. And the old one, which you remember is missing a bearing. this thing has big other problems internal. There's another bearing in there that's bad. But the only thing, this was hard to find because they were all pretty well tore up or had the same issues mine did from a shifter mechanism standpoint. Like I said, you can see that the bushings are out on the shifter. This one's still pretty good. Bushings are in. The only thing wrong with this one is this is popped off here at the end where you got the push button, and mine is still solid. So what I think I'm going to do is, since I screwed up and snapped this little thing off when I was taking the multifunction switch off, I think I'm going to pop this wire harness off of this one and see how, I think there's just a pin that's driven through here, to see if I can get this off, and I'm going to swap it out with this unit here if I can. I don't think that's going to be too difficult because I have all my same harnesses here, same everything. The only other thing I noticed is this little bugger here, which is here. Not quite sure what that's for, but this one doesn't have it, and I had to do a little bit of creative work since it didn't have a key to get that out without damaging it, because you got to be able to turn the key in order to be able to push up the little pin inside there to slide the lock out. So that got creative. Yeah, that's what I'm going to try to do, is pop this out and see what I need to do to swap that around, and then we're going to get ready to start putting it back in. Alright, well, we got her swapped. It is just a pin. Just got to tap it out with a hammer. Not much to it. And I also swapped out the little gator here. I kept that one off the new one because mine was kind of junk and sticky and horrible. But so we got that fixed. There's a little bit more slop in this one in this direction, but it still works fine, and I don't feel like pulling this whole pin here and redoing everything, so it's going to work fine. Next thing I'm going to do, I think, is just get my key in there and put it in and make sure everything works, and I can shift it and do what it is I need to do. I did find out what this reluctor wheel is for, well, at least on the one that I took it out of, which was a 2000 Eddie Bauer Expedition. There was a sensor on here that was looking at it, so I don't know whether it's steering wheel angle or how fast you're turning it for some traction control, something or other, but obviously mine doesn't have it, so I don't need it. There was also some other security stuff, I'm assuming, around the key here with a bunch of other wires hanging off of it that I don't have. Now again, that's most likely because this car that it came out of had a chip and a key where you had to be able to, where mine is prior to that technology, so it shouldn't be a big deal. And so yeah, now I'm going to reinstall the key and just make sure that works, and then take it out and then start putting it back together. Okay, so she's in, she works. Here's something I found out in the yard, which kind of makes sense. The way to get this off is by pushing this little ball detent in here. But you can't do that unless the key is in the on position. Only then can you push that in far enough to remove this thing. If you try to remove it with the key in the off position, you can see this goes quite a ways down. But if you try to remove it with that key in the off position, it will not let you do it. So if you're at a junkyard trying to get one of these columns and there are no keys in the car, you are probably going to have to break it. And I was able to get it off. Basically, I ended up having to put a pair of these on it, turn it until I was able to tear the inside of it out, and then I was able to get in there with some needle nose and pull everything out that allowed me to turn it, and then I was able to slide it out and open it up. But what you don't want to do is, this is one of the reasons I didn't take one of the other columns, is somebody had drilled this out They had drilled this damn hole out to get the ignition cylinder for some stupid reason. I don't know. And so that was a good column that I was working on, but then I realized that was junk and I didn't want it. So I went to another one. Probably took me 10 cars to find one that was in good enough shape that didn't have all the same problems, but out the door, $42 and change. So it's a hell of a lot better than trying to buy one of these new, since I'm sure they don't make them. Alright, so back she goes. Well, took her for a test drive and it is fantastic. Works like a charm, everything still works. Had to do a little twiddling with the shifter pointer adjustment just to make sure it lined up perfect, but everything is good. And one thing I'm going to show you right now, it is so good that I believe this poor thing has been fouled up since I got it, because that thing has always steered really hard compared to other trucks I've driven, and now it doesn't anymore. Now it's like every other truck I've ever driven. So at some point maybe I'll take this apart and let you see what's inside of it, but for right now, all good. That's how you change a steering column. And if you got any comments, please leave them. Give me a thumbs up if you want to, if this was helpful to you. If you got any other questions, throw them down there in the comments. And y'all take care.